I'm going to call the meeting to order, and we will begin with flag salute. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I don't believe there are any emergency additions or modifications to the agenda, so I'm looking for a motion to approve today's agenda.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And public comments. Stephanie Washburn.
Do I need to go over here?
Yes, there's a
Okay.
microphone, so.
Thank you for having this public forum. It's great to have a chance to get involved. I'm a professor at Santa Barbara City College, and I have a son who is at Montessori, and I'd very much like to send him to public school in the Valley. And I also have a number of friends, I probably can count at least 10 families who are also really considering that shift from private to public. And we were just discussing, lamenting how many higher income families are sending their kids to private school. So that's all to preface that I really believe in public education. But honestly, as a parent, I also look at the test scores, and I'm really concerned about sending my son to at least some of the schools up here. And I feel like I don't really understand why the scores are low, and I would like to hear that from you. And I know that test scores are not everything, but when I compare the test scores to Montecito schools, to Santa Barbara schools, to a number of Ventura schools, they're significantly lower. And we're in such a competitive world. I just think as a parent, and I can speak for my fellow parent friends, it's really hard to commit when those are low. And I see it for both low income, but also for higher income students. So I'm really looking for answers on those questions, and I know I might be the one person here, but I know a number of parents who are hung up on the same thing. So that was my primary question for you, and I understand it's not a Q&A forum, but there's a huge appetite for understanding that and knowing how we can help. I know that City College, for example, is going to be putting forward a huge bond measure to raise funds to make up for our funding gaps. So I really feel like people would step up if there was a clear way for us to do it. And again, I'm in public education. I know how hard it is, but I'm looking for some information and guidance there. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I would just say, we have recently on our Facebook page and on our website, we had a whole meeting where we talked, not a whole meeting, significant part of a meeting where we talked about our dashboard results.
Okay.
And we have a video link to that on our Facebook page.
Okay.
So if that's helpful to have that information,
absolutely.
we just recently, I think in the last 2 weeks, had a Facebook post kind of with an article describing the recent dashboard scores. So that's
Okay, and the dashboard is the standard?
yeah, the dashboard is our overall color scheme that the state uses to compare us to other schools around the state. So
Okay,
And those
One-
are the
one
test
metric,
score
right.
answers that you're.
test scores are part of that metric.
okay.
But I would like to, because it's sort of part of today's agenda,
Great.
is to talk about that goal setting
Okay.
and what our concerns are and how we can help achieve those. And, certainly for me personally, one of those is reaching out to those parents who are looking and how do we get information. And obviously we had a group of parents who were interested in a charter and what was attractive about that versus what we have to offer, and finding a way to meet and help each other.
Yeah.
So that's, I think.
Yeah, no, for the record, I do not support the charter mission, but I understand the appetite of many parents, so I did see supporting that. And I guess just addressing the root cause of that restlessness and looking for something new.
And I would recommend to parents, going and talking to the schools and the teachers.
I've visited every school
Yeah.
and I've seen wonderful teaching going on, and then it's kind of the honestly disparity of them just not understanding. Well, I saw a class that seemed like it was going beautifully, and not understanding the disparity between the test scores and what I saw in the classroom. And again, I know test scores aren't everything, so I hope that you do not start testing the kids all the time, but there must be other solutions.
I would like, maybe we should talk about this later, but I don't know if you're gonna be around later.
I am not,
But
actually, I have to get
it
back to you.
seems to me like, and my kids went to the schools here, and my experience, and maybe there's a way we can quantify this, is that parents who are educated and engaged, their kids have gone to some of the best colleges in the country.
Yeah.
And I think when you look at test scores, you're looking at an average. And while there are a lot of students who don't go to college at all, who choose to go to community college, which is a great option.
Yeah.
I think we're really looking at subgroups. And if you're part of subgroup A, your kids are probably going to get the results of subgroup A. If you're in subgroup D, your kids are probably going to get the results of subgroup D.
Yeah.
And I think that's a way for parents to look at the situation.
Well, and I always think, private schools actually don't have testing scores, so we don't know how those
Well,
go,
that's
right?
also
And
why
we don't
I'm
wanna
here,
get
because
into
I don't
that.
think that
But
that's a
I
better
think as a
option.
board or as a district, we're trying to bring all groups up. And that's, it's, for me, I think that's really important to say, how are we addressing the whole student body and bringing all, all
Well,
students up?
it's catching the higher needs students, and I think also simultaneously providing enough challenge for the more accelerated students. So did I hear there's a GATE program in the works?
Yep.
Well, that's really appealing as a parent, and I've spoken with other parents who responded to that really positively. But can you, what is the challenge? I mean, Ventura faces the same challenges, so what are?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop you there, only
Okay.
because the process that we need to adhere to is having public comment, and then
Okay.
we're not really allowed to deliberate and discuss because it wasn't on the agenda.
Okay, I understand.
And so just in order to keep us on that
So the best place I can go
Protocol.
to for information, you mentioned, is your Facebook.
Yeah, that has one piece of it, and then you certainly can call the parents, you can call our assistant superintendent, Dr. Nog, she'd be happy to have a conversation
Okay.
with you about it, and the other thing is, test scores are a lagging indicator, so we're looking at any given time, the test scores that are published are
Mhm.
based on 1 to 2 years ago, depending on if you're looking at the dashboard, so, we'd be happy to talk to you about what we've been doing when you get our
Yeah, I
test
would
scores,
love
and then
to,
like,
yeah.
these are the programs that we've been implementing to move forward based on that
Mhm.
data, so, you won't see those results until basically
Okay.
this year. But we have had at least 2 sessions this year where we've talked about test scores in the dashboard that you can view online.
Okay.
It was the
great.
December meeting,
Mhm.
so if you look up the December video.
But
Great.
my understanding is that we're only a point or two behind Ventura. They're not significantly higher in the dashboard numbers than we are, in test score numbers.
I
I mean,
was
maybe a
looking at some of the
particular
highest
school, but-
performing schools there are doing much better than,
It depends on the school.
Depends on the school, okay.
Right.
yeah.
So I just look at the Ventura County,
Mhm.
unified as a whole. I haven't looked at individual schools.
There are definitely some extraordinary schools there that are doing great across the board with low-income and high-income students, yeah.
So
Thank
despite
you
our
very
structural
much.
limitations here, you shouldn't walk away thinking that this is not an important topic for us.
Okay, good, yeah, no, I
Mhm.
appreciate, I understand the limitations
And
of
it
the
is
format,
part
so.
of our discussion in open session about goal setting and
Okay.
will be discussed.
Well, I would love to help haul a ton of private school families back to public schools.
We would love to
Help
help
us
you
do it.
help us do
Yeah.
that, yes.
You can also reach out to us individually, and my name's Kevin Ruff.
Okay.
And if you would email me, I would happily tell you my perspective on that
Oh,
subject.
great, would you come speak to a group of
Yeah,
moms and dads?
sure.
Okay, that would be amazing, thank you.
Thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming.
That is the,
I didn't sign up in advance, but
okay,
actually, I'd love to talk on this topic, but I came for something else. I do think that the testing is a distorted view of education, actually, the high-stakes testing. And tests a very limited amount of the educational process. And I think schools ought to come up with their own metrics in which they evaluate and how the school is doing. I don't think that it should be stuck with whatever the federal government and the states are pushing for this particular approach. Last time that I talked to you, I was actually kind of addressing this issue, which is doing a detailed analysis why we're losing students. And this would be one of the issues. But I'm not going to address that now, and I had told you I would follow up with this stuff in an email, but I got enmeshed in this water crisis, so I couldn't do it. But I wanted to talk about something else, which I think could be, and by the way, one of those ways to attract people back is the dual language programs, because middle class, upper middle class parents love those programs. The other one I wanted to address, which I've dealt with before at a community college, is sustainability. We just had Ojai just set up a climate crisis group. They had a workshop on Saturday, and of course, part of it they addressed the schools. And I was just looking online about it. I was involved in North Carolina at a community college, which was struggling in terms of its transfer of kids to, regular universities. But they had a sustainable agriculture program that people came all over the country to go to. Then they added green technology. So I got involved with them and saying, one way to attract students would be to have your whole mission around sustainability, because that is very popular and it's pretty much the change in where careers are going. So I volunteered and I started teaching a course in Introduction to Sustainable Communities. Now I knew part of it, but I had to bring in people for the various parts of it. And this was back in 2009. There were no textbooks at that point. The field has exploded since then, and there are plenty of textbooks. So there are two aspects of that which I think we should be looking at. One is our physical plant. And you could get teachers, you can get parents, you can get citizens, you can get the town involved in making our physical plant, like Nordhoff, which I always considered Metellaha a desert, could use a lot more trees. And there are, there's trees of Ojai. And the second part is making it part of your curriculum, environmental education. I know you're working on that, but I think if that was made a theme, in other words, if Ojai is the perfect place to do it, because we are the environmental leader in our county, I think. And so given all the people that are involved in environmental issues, I think that would be a way, if that was a focus of our educational curriculum and activities of students working with green groups, I think that would, and it was marketed that way, a way to bring more students into our school system, even people from out of the district, because we are a school of choice, could bring them in. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Jeffrey, I'll just tell you, the Guiding Coalition Group has been working on this. They have a whole list of things specifically to, at every level, things that they would want to see around environmental stewardship and regeneration. So at the end of the Guiding Coalition work, which should finish around April, there will be a public reporting out of that group's recommendations, ties to resources and kind of a prioritizing of what steps they think we should do, looking holistically across the curriculum and the physical plants and that kind of thing. So there's a team of people that are working on that'll bring those recommendations out. So look forward to sharing those with you.
My only response to that needs to be made public. People know that it's going on.
Yeah.
They actually have, like we had on Saturday, a forum where people could come in, because I brought it up at the meeting and someone in the back said, oh, they're working on it, but didn't give any details.
Yeah,
So how
It's a
did you
work
hear
group.
about that last meeting that you went to about the one you're talking about?
Because that was in the newspaper. It was, the city had this climate crisis.
Okay, we just have trouble getting stuff in the paper.
Oh, okay.
Not on our end, on their end.
Yeah, well, I can help you with that. I seem to know the editors a little bit. So,
As we finish that work, so right now it's a work group, right? So their work isn't public because it's not finished, but the products will be made public and shared
Yeah.
and discussed, and we'll.
yeah, well, what I'm really talking about is a community-wide process that everybody would be engaged in, which would make them feel like more ownership of the schools, more investment in the schools, because schools should be all of us. They are our central.
Do you know about the Guiding Coalitions?
I don't know anything about it, no. I've
Okay,
never
so
heard of it.
that was we invited the public in.
Through the
and,
newspaper.
By
Through
the
the
way, I
newspaper.
did write to you about it.
But
And
it was in the paper.
and
it was in the paper
had
with the
volunteers.
deadline after you could apply.
Oh,
But we took applications after that, knowing that that came out late,
So
so
you didn't offer me one.
if there was an application and we
And
went through all the
this,
applications that were
the
submitted.
Guiding Coalition, work is the first step, and,
Yeah,
and there
yes,
will
I
be
knew about it
more.
after the fact, in the paper. It had been posted on the website, but I don't look at the website every day. It
Right.
had been sent to parents, but it was never in advance sent out and inviting people to come in. And that's what I was complaining about, because
Okay,
I had been to one of those forums that you all had at the beginning.
Right.
I was very excited about it, and I would have volunteered.
Well, we
So
do
my
know
wife-
that,
Huh?
we do know that we can always improve in telling
Yeah.
our story.
Mm-hmm.
It's difficult to get things out in all of the channels to all of the people, but it
Yeah.
is something that we continue to work on, to be much more visible and proactive. I think we underappreciate a lot of our accomplishments, and that's something that we're gonna talk about today.
I agree. I think that's, I mean, I go to the minor South school, my wife goes to 2 of those schools to help out with the garden, and we're just incredibly impressed with the principals and what you're doing. But I'm hearing the other side, which is all the people at my gym and other places giving this negative message, and it's hard for me, who's on the outside, to be able to defend the inside when I'm not invited in the inside. So if you really wanna get people to get those messages to the newspaper and stuff, invite people in the community who are active in these kinds of issues.
thank
know,
you.
'cause-
I so appreciate you coming and giving us the feedback, because that really helps to drive where we're headed.
Yeah, I mean, if I'd
But-
have known about it, you weren't getting coverage in the newspaper, I'd call and yell at the newspaper. I was a journalist, so, and they do listen to me.
Well, we will continue to improve in that area. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I think that's all of our public speakers. I don't see anybody else. So, we are going to move into closed session at this point, but thank you for coming this morning. So we are reconvening an open session. We had a closed session meeting before this to discuss employee mid-cycle evaluation, and there is nothing at this time to report out, so we move on to our open session retreat discussion items, goal setting, activity, and additional topics for consideration. And we welcome Cheryl.
Hi,
I'm so
everybody.
glad you're here and can join
Cheryl?
us.
Hello. Hi.
This section, I believe Tiffany is gonna lead for us.
So our goal in the next hour and 15 minutes is to get a sense of goal setting. We may not get everything done, but to align our goals, and our work is to align, to set board goals. And the board goals should align with the vision, and they should align and inform the LCAP goals. So there's 2 kind of big pieces of work for us to do. One is looking at the structure of goals and how do we want our goals to look. So I've given you some examples of different districts and their board goals. So you have a packet that has several different options in it, and
These aren't online.
they are actually in the back of the room. So, and they are all online because they're all public board goals. I'm sorry, Cheryl. I think maybe your packet's sitting on my desk. So what I wanted to walk through with you is some structures of different goals. If you look at Oxnard Union High School District, and I'll tell you, I was just talking to this superintendent. Yeah. And she was saying, every single report, everything she does ties back to these board goals. So if they give a staff report, they put, board goal 1.1 or whatever. So these guide the formation of the agendas and the presentation. So you can just kind of see theirs. At this point, we're not looking at what their goals are necessarily, but they have the broad goal and then specific sub-goals about how they're gonna do that related to activities, specific activities, and they revisit these every single year, and they take activities off or they take goals off. If you look at Frewsburg, which is on the next page, they have a broad goal and they tie that to their commitments. And then they have some more detailed plans there. These are less program specific, so if you look at Oxnard unions, I mean, this says that it talks about Chromebooks, and it talks about kind of specific programs. On the Frewsburg one, it's less specific and kind of just broad statements.
More like a mission.
Right, more like a mission statement. And you can kind of see, facilities, technology broadly. And then District 49, and I don't think that's in California, because it's called District 49. But these are kind of the most high-level goals, where they just say, these are the things we're about, and they have a sentence describing them. So there's kind of very detailed programmatic specific, or program specific, to these broad board goals. And then you have two additional documents. One is this colorful sheet that's from Valverde, where the board goals are across the top. And then the tasks and the measurable goals are included in there. The board sets those top goals. Oh, I actually have it. I can show it to you. There you go. So the board sets essentially those top goals in white. Staff does the tasks, and then they work together on the measurable outcomes. So it's kind of a three-level piece. Yeah, their graphics are really nice. It's actually in a cardstock, and they hand it out everywhere, and they, they've got some great graphics. They've also got like 33,000 kids. So.
32,000 students?
I'm making it up, but they have,
Oh, wow.
I mean, literally like
That's like a state.
thousands of kids. The other one that just is a totally different model is the strategic plan from Newark. And this is a model that I am familiar with, where the school sets what they call kind of their big rocks. So this is that more like high level strategic piece. And then they just have a little narrative. So instead of having bullet points, they write up, and then staff works with them on this next piece where they tie the initiatives to the big rocks. And then that just gets updated. So it's kind of a running list of things that they're doing around each of those areas. So those are my examples. We can build whatever we want to build, but I wanted to show you some ideas and concepts that are out there and see where you wanted to start as a framework that we could start building together.
Go ahead.
I like both of these, where you have these big items and then you break them down, and the breaking down would change every year. I think it also helps, or it would help, because I've had, like, this one on the colorful one says reading by third grade. I've had conversations with Cheryl, so as a board member, when people talk to you, or even you're, maybe as a parent, you see something and you're involved in, and you bring it to administration, you'd be saying, this is one of our goals. I'm talking about this because of one of the big rocks or something. I think it helps focus in on, versus this sort of lofty stuff. I feel like that's what we did.
This stuff is already there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
My comment is, I really think goals should be measurable. Otherwise, we don't know if we've done anything or not, and or done anything useful. We may have worked really hard and not done anything useful, so we need to decide what's useful, how are we going to measure it. That's important to me. Valverde's the only one I can see that has that in any respect. And I like the format and everything, but I guess in my mind, I would almost rather work backwards in terms of picking goals that we can measure. Maybe not decide how we're going to measure them, but keep in mind that we would want to measure them in choosing something to work on.
The corporate traditional way of getting here, right, is to start with your mission and your vision and extract things from there, right? Because that's how you make sure that what you're operationally doing is in line with your vision. And I look at these categories, and I look at our vision, and they're all up there, right? I mean, there's facilities, there's, you know, there's innovation, there's quality, and so there's too many, right, in terms of the bullet points there. But I think it would be good, you know, I too like this. I mean, I like the big picture, and I like that ultimately there's some way to measure it, and it puts context around our efforts, right? And actually, it's really funny. Not funny, but I mean, I have notes here in terms of LCAP and the single school plan and all that stuff, is that there's a gazillion individual pieces in all that stuff, right? Like there's just like a fire hose of stuff that we're doing. And it's all good stuff, but how is it related to an overall what we're trying to accomplish and what our overall strategies are? How does it tie in? What is the touchstone like this provides to take every activity, and what you were saying in terms of what they do at Oxnard, right? Take every activity and back to the touchstone. Is it where we should be spending our energy? And so I'm hoping that this will put context around all of that and maybe even some guidance, because you can't do 50 million things well simultaneously. You just can't. And so I don't think it's fair to staff, you know, to have 50-page things of a gazillion things we're gonna do. A lot of it is just part of our daily operation.
Right.
But where do we focus our efforts with limited resources? That's really what I'm hoping to get out of this. And how do we tie that to what we're telling the public that we're gonna do? Or, for instance, if we're gonna come up with a private school killer objective. Shoot. What? That's not what I mean. If we're gonna draw people, you know, recover enrollment from the competition, how are we gonna do that, right? How are we focusing our efforts? So that's kind of what I'm hoping to see. That's why I like this, the broader things. That made a lot of sense.
If I can just briefly, Thane, on the things that are measurable in Valverde, a few of these are a little bit forced, right? So if you're looking at the facilities, like the FIT score.
No, I'm not saying that these are, I just like
Right.
the concept.
But what I wanted to say, some of these are really hard to measure, right? Some goals are easily measurable, like reading by third grade. Some goals like community relations are really hard to put to backwards map from a measurable objective, right? And so if we want to do that, I just want to think about that, you know, they're totally different, like, abilities to measure easily, and some of them, I would hope to not create a system where we're putting in a false measurement that doesn't make sense, like maybe community relations wouldn't have the same type of measurable objective, does that, you know, so some, or maybe we want some that are measurable and some that we just say, like, these are our daily practices that we wanna do.
I think you can measure, there's quality measures, there's the activity measures, right? I know you know this, cause you
Oh, I
went
do,
through the
yeah.
pathways thing, right?
Yeah.
And that was filled with metrics.
It was,
Some of those were activity metrics, right?
Right.
The number of contacts made, the number of students at the mentor luncheons. And some of those were quality measures, right? The number of completions, the number of transfers. So you're right, everything's gonna have a different kind of measure, but it's like training effectiveness, right? Training or teaching, it's so subjective, right? But one of the measures is to ask the participants, do you feel like you learned something?
right,
You measure what you can, right, with an understanding on our part that some measurements are really
Softer than
concrete,
others.
objective, and some are just how people feel. But people's feelings matter too, right? So those measurements are valuable. But I do think some kind of metric is really important.
I want to throw in there that I kind of feel less that the metric in terms of the outcome is important as that a metric in terms of the doing is important. You know, for me, you know, like if someone said, you know, if I said to you every morning I'm gonna do 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, and, you know, 50 burpees, I don't have to be a physiologist to know that's gonna have a positive effect on my health. I don't have to measure it so much as I have to do it. So it feels to me like, I think that the area for improvement in these kinds of ideas is the doing more than the recording the result. I feel, because some of them I agree, it's more subjective. If you said we will endeavor to have 3 or 2 workshops on important issues, and then we do those things, or we have open forums as groups of 2 board members around town at coffees that we sponsor. Doing those things, presumably, you could look at it in a year and go, well, how did that, was that good? Was it bad? How do we feel about it? But it's the doing of it, I think, that is where we often fall short.
But that's something measurable. Did we do
The
it or did
doing
we
is
not do it?
measurable, for
Right.
sure, and
Right.
and that's always measurable.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right, and it's generally, I mean, to use that as an example, right? I mean, that might be our proposal to increase community engagement.
Right.
Right? And you're right, it's harder than hell to figure out, are they more engaged or less engaged? But we did what we thought would enhance that. So that's, I think, a legitimate measure.
So maybe they're not so much measurable goals, but we could look at our tasks and see if we completed our tasks, and then for some have measurable goals.
Well, our goal is to complete the task.
Well, I mean,
But
the engage to impact workshops, for instance, I think those were a wildly great idea. Right? I also think they had a good impact. I also would like to see something like that continue, right? Under the rubric of community engagement, because I think it's a successful strategy. So that measure, there might be 2, right? One is the doing. Did we do it? I would also suggest that, this metric mindset would lead us to asking the people there, how beneficial was that experience for them? How likely are they to be more engaged with us because of that experience, right? It's a way of really validating whether what we're doing is having an impact. And I think that's important for us.
Well, and you also take those, obviously, those meetings created that, right? You're hearing from the community, what are you doing with that information, and is it moving forward? Which for me, and I apologize for not writing back to you, because she, said, are there goals you guys wanna specifically talk about, which I guess what we'll do now. But one of those, for me, is from hearing from the community with the Summit Charter School, is, what are those parents looking for that they're not seeing?
Yes.
A lot of times there was then other people who stood up and said, we're already doing that. So then that tells me, well, then we're not being clear about what we're doing. So how do we take those 2 opposites and create a goal? That to reach the community, to let them know what we're doing, and to answer, to give the parents who were seeking the charter school, are seeking the charter school, something to look at and say, oh, they are doing that, or they weren't doing it, but they heard us, and so now I'm gonna be able to get that in the district, whereas before I didn't.
It's like the parent that came to talk to us this morning.
Right.
And what would be helpful is if we could hand her a document and say, here are the tasks, that's one of our goals, and here are the tasks that we're currently doing, right? Because we're doing a lot of things, but you would only know that by listening, by being in a school, or by listening to board meetings where we give you reports. But if we had on a document, I mean, you could probably cobble it from our website, but not in an easy place, where we said, we're doing the raft program, we're doing Levered in 4th grade, we're doing, et cetera, et cetera.
Executive summary,
Right,
For
right.
parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or students are graduating, going to these universities. We have that information, but it's not public.
Right.
As far as I know.
It's not.
Well, and I also think, because Cheryl and I have talked over the last couple of years, you do have to, you have to, there's a lot of great ideas. And you can't be constantly changing on the staff what your idea is and what so right now, we're focusing on primary grade reading. And so if you're an outside person who's got other ideas, we can go, well, does that help this? This is what we're working on, this is what we're focusing on. And let us bring that to where it needs to be, and then we can maybe.
And we do that with our new vision, right? So if if things support those components of the vision, right, then we do them. If they don't support those components of the vision, then we say, that's great, we're not gonna be able to do that at this time. But we refer back to the vision really frequently. In every single leadership team meeting, we talk about, what best practice is. We have an activity around the vision and vision implementation. When we just did our student survey about how we're doing in that middle part, the heart of the vision, we did the student survey, and then in the middle school and high school, we attached the vision in the survey and said, here's our vision, we wanna know how we're doing on this middle part. So that work is happening. So what I would hope is, the goals are helping to frame that vision, because that vision has got some traction, and so as we're tying it together. Does that kind of make sense? But that's more staff specific, but that vision doesn't include fiscal goals. It doesn't include specific community relations or facilities or, that high level kind of thinking. So, okay, so it sounds like this is the kind of format that we want. So today, maybe our goal is to identify these big broad categories, and then staff would bring back to you the tasks that we're currently doing, and then we would identify if there are gaps in those tasks. And then we could work on we would bring back some suggested measurable goals with your guidance on those broad categories.
I think that works.
Does that sound good?
Yeah.
Do we wanna try to tie those big rocks or whatever we wanna call them into those categories? Or is there additional, I guess you're saying there's additional, cause fiscal isn't in there.
Right, right,
Professional
because
development.
that's student-centered, right? So for our students, we don't have a specific.
They're not terribly concerned that our budget is balanced.
Right. Not really. I also wanted to just bring for you as a reminder our LCAP goals, which we may be revising this year. Or are revising, Sharon?
We are actually, the template is changing,
Right.
and we were thinking of, having a sort of a, I can't remember what they call it, but like a focus goal, which is engaging our communities through the Engage to Impact series and the Guiding Coalition. So that's kind of the broad over goal. And then 2 goals under it, which are essentially academics and school culture, which if you kind of think about that vision there, we're kind of representing that, right? So we're engaging the community, looking at our core values, bringing in our stakeholder input. Our academic goal will be around, like PLC work, making sure that we're meeting students' needs, also adding enrichment opportunities and extension opportunities for students. And then the school culture goal is all those things that incorporate social and emotional learning, restorative justice, the pieces in the middle there. So it'll be a broad goal and then 2 under goals.
As opposed to right now, I'll just show you, this is our LCAP template. I'm sorry, I don't want to make you.
Or I should say that's our idea. So if there's input, please. feel free.
And I would say to your point earlier about the single school plan and the safety plan and the LCAP, like, we have no control over those things. We have, the system is designed for us to have 1,000 different plans. And I would say 10 years ago when I worked at the CDE, we were saying we should just make them have one plan. And
That still happens.
it's never gonna happen. I mean, maybe, but it's not gonna happen because sometimes the plans are federally required and it's pretty complicated, but.
But what we can do is we can take 4 or 5 or 6 out of that. When I went to one of the county meetings, they had a graphic where they just showed 4 or 5 that they were really focused on, and this is what we're doing.
Right. And your board goals should inform, those plans, right? And they should refer to the board goals when we have them. So I'll just show you our LCAP goals, cause I clicked off of it accidentally. So for every LCAP goal that we have, so this is goal 1, increase student achievement and literacy, which includes providing instructional materials, quality teachers, and then, so we have these annual measurable outcomes. So we do a lot of this, right?
Right, those measurements may already exist.
Yeah, and then we have actions for each one of these. So we have a goal and then we have all these actions specific. So I want to make sure that what we're doing is kind of in alignment and we can shift the LCAP to match what we do today.
I think it's a little of both, right?
Right.
It's a little bit focusing, right? There's a ton of stuff there. We give you our overall things, there's either new stuff that needs to be done or stuff that's already being done that you bring forward for focus, right? I mean, because this isn't, I mean, they have an LCAP too,
right.
right? And they have a gazillion things and a single school and a on and
Yes.
on and on,
Yes,
right?
they have all
And-
those things.
And the mere fact that all of those things exist suggests to me that we need a focusing exercise,
Yes.
right? Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, I think it's also important to, cause I remember when my oldest son, who's now 24, was in, I think, 3rd grade, there was a GATE program. But there wasn't really a GATE program. I mean, we said we had a GATE program, but I think fiscally it had gone away, or I don't know what exactly had happened. And, so then I started working with the principal at that school about what was the program, how could we initiate it, how could we add to it? As a parent, I was seeking to help. And so I was given, well, we're doing this, and we're doing this, and so I don't wanna take a goal, or how do I say this? Here, here's our LCAP goal, and just fill it with things we're already doing.
Right.
Because in a way, what we're already doing is still giving us these low scores on the dashboard. And that the community needs to see what is different, yes, we do these things, but what have we added recently that we're focusing on to change that initiative? These break out into single groups that, the district has been doing for years are great, but they're not achieving the goal for every student or enough students. So, do we keep that? Yes, but, we add the raft, we are changing things, and those things need to be shown, and they need to be added to, because there are parents who are not either seeing it in their particular school, or, and you have different, I don't know, I'm getting a little lost, but that's what happens.
All right, so having these samples of goals in front of you, and these are LCAP goals, this is where we do the work. And if you notice in the Valverde ones, they're not sentence goals, they're categories, which makes it probably a little easier for us in terms of the wordsmithing right now. So what categories are of interest to you?
The piece of paper you're looking at, is there any way to?
It's
This one.
it's that one.
Oh, because you handed something out, I don't know.
The LCAP.
Oh, the
I just-
LCAP goals.
That was the LCAP goals that I was showing. I've been showing everything they have on the screen.
Okay. What
So-
is raft, by the way? You guys use a lot of.
It's
It's
a reading intervention program that we're
Okay.
using, using the Sunday system.
Okay.
So what categories, I was gonna make you do an activity with stickies and things like that, but you can just tell me.
Well,
I'll take
I think improving student achievement,
I would actually put that into 3 different I would put ELA as one, I would put math as one. I think they're different.
and that would be okay.
Student achievement,
But if I guess one of the questions is, at the end of the day, how many do we wanna end up with?
yeah.
And if that number's under 10, I wouldn't care if all of our goals were around student achievement. If we said we wanna improve ELA, we wanna improve math, we wanna improve, and those are all of our goals, that's all we're gonna focus on for a while, is just improving student. Not that there aren't other goals that I would be supportive of, but if that's what we wanted to do, I'd be okay
But if
with
we had a broad heading of student achievement, wouldn't ELA and math be the tasks under that? So we're doing this in math and we're doing this in
But
ELA and we're doing
wouldn't they
this.
get lost? Cause I can look at that and then I can say, well, what about sustainability and environmental, right? That's something that all our parents are asking for. We want our school to be, teaching students about sustainability.
That's not gonna
and-
fall under student achievement.
Right.
Actually, my notes have that under innovation, because it's an area that I know it started actually with Ojai Independent, right? It was like, no, that's not broad enough, right? But what does that represent to me? What that represents to me is the innovation and the trying new things that we're trying to bring, like what you were saying. It's like, we can't keep doing the same thing over and over again. To me, that's important enough that I would almost see it as a standalone thing, because if done right, in my head, of course, you know, it covers everything, right? We handle facilities differently than what we do now. We build our curriculum differently. We deliver it differently. So I'm like a really broad stuff, but I don't know if that's.
Dual language.
Oh,
That's
don't start,
innovation.
'cause I love it.
There will be an agenda item on February's agenda around dual immersion.
Can
So I just got back from a PLC conference.
And we're so excited to hear
With
about it.
12 people that are just fired up about PLC work.
Professional learning communities.
Professional learning communities. And the thing about a professional learning communities, it's not a program, it's a process, right? So it's not like Levered where we just bring in this new program. If you bring in a program like Levered or the Sunday system, you can do that quickly. You can bring it in, you can train staff in a day or two, and you can get them started. And yes, it takes a while to hone their craft, but it's underway in a few months. Professional learning communities are a process that we just saw an award-winning school. So once a year they award a school across the nation for the best PLC work, right? And this school, it's Westmont High in Illinois. They had 99% graduation rates, 100% of African American students and 100% of Latino students graduated. Their test scores are through the charts. They are just this model PLC school, and they're in year 9 of implementing PLCs. When you're talking about transformational change instead of structural change, it's not going to happen overnight. Yes, you'll start to see results, but it doesn't take 1 year like Levered or Sunday System. And I would just caution us as we think about this. And I was really thinking in my head, you guys all should have been there as board members. At the end, they had teachers stand up and administrators stand up and, you know, who was in the room and clapping for everybody. And then there were board members there. And I thought, our board members have to go. If you're going to be behind this work and really understand what it is and what it does for school systems, you have to sort of live and breathe it for 3 days with these people that are doing the hard work. And we heard from, we heard from the PLC rock stars for these 3 days, right? People with PhDs who've been not just doing the research, but the practitioners. They've been doing the research, but they're also administrators or have been administrators in schools that they turned around. So you're hearing from the very people who did the work and saw the successes. But again, it's not in a year or two. It's 5 to 10 years before you see this kind of systemic change, because you're asking teachers to teach and do things in a way they've never done before. So I just want you to know that we're fired up. I mean, there are 12 of us that just came back who are we know this is the right work to do in our schools. I think Tiffany would say the secondary team felt the same way. And so when we're thinking about what we're going to put into our wording here, I would really encourage you to think about making sure that we have that stamped into our goals. Like this is who we should be as a district, a professional learning community. And it's still hard to understand for everybody, but it's the right work to do. It's the right work to do, for sure. So
I'm so excited to hear all about it.
I'm going to
Thank
tell you
for-
lots more things. I know Angie's
bringing
already
it back.
preparing for the next board meeting of all the things she wants to tell you, because she of course went. So
So we have improving, I'm looking at our broad categories, right? So we have improving student achievement, and we have innovation. And we can put these up here and change them later. This is what I'm hearing. What else?
One of the things on my mind is the equitability issue, and I'm not sure where that falls in any of these. And I see equity as being a broad category too. Equity between our schools, equity between our students, equity between course offerings. So I don't know if that's its own, or if
I
it
think
belongs
so.
under something else.
I definitely think so, and I just want to put another plug in for PLC work. I want you to know that what your team heard for the last 3 days is nothing but equity.
Yeah.
And PLC work is all about equity, because you say all means all. You're talking about every kid learning at high levels, and that is what
true equity is. So it's also embedded. I know it's still very vague. What does this whole PLC thing mean? But again, we heard from people that that's what when I'm saying this high school had 100% graduation rate from their African American population and their Latino population. That is because that's what PLC work does.
Yeah.
It really does. So
Yeah, I think equity is a good separate goal.
So where do you see as we're pulling up these student achievement, innovation, equity, where do you see a mention of PLC in landing?
I personally think it should be a broad title, but it could land under any of those. But
Because I was looking at this and it says professional development, which is what
yeah,
the
but
PLC's was or
it's
is.
it's
but-
not professional development. It's a way of thinking about it, and it could be that we have a title. I want to think about how
Yeah.
we can. I don't know that it. I'm gonna think about that a little bit more, but we'll put it up. We'll
I like what you said, though, all means all.
All means all.
I really like
Right.
that.
That's the tagline. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what we're talking about in PLC work. And then we have to talk about what that means, right? Like,
But, right, is PLC going to be part of our achieving every goal, or is it gonna be a separate category?
right. It's really about academics, but equity falls under there because a lot of what we talk about with equity is, it's not all we talk about with equity, but a lot of what we talk about with equity is the achievement gap, right? And then you're referring back to academics. So PLC work is about academics. It probably belongs under an academic category, but I just want you to know that equity is embedded in it because it really hits that achievement gap issue that we all worry about.
But I think having equity as a separate goal is important because I think the idea of equity between schools is an important thing for us to capture. Because I hear about that in the community, I think it's something to say like we're working on that.
Mm-hmm.
It's important enough in the community as a topic alone,
Right.
anyway. I mean, we've heard a lot about it recently.
Well, and especially in how you allocate resources, absolutely, right?
Okay, so we have improving student achievement, innovation, equity,
What about our 4 groups, our
yeah.
guiding coalitions, is there?
Right, so environment, wellness, creativity, and inclusion. So I wonder if there's a goal specifically around, I mean, essentially, those are our community values, right?
So reflecting our community values is a
Right,
goal
so
of
if we
ours.
have, community values reflected in school or some version of that.
Well, that might be, I mean, Valverde had community relations, which to some degree, I think, is important, right? We were just talking about getting our message out and all of that other stuff, but it's more than just the relations. When you say community values, that's community outside, that's community inside, that's a community mindset
Right.
that I kind of find attractive.
So if we're saying, our parents care about sustainability, then we're saying that's a community value, and we're working on integrating that community value in a meaningful way. Guiding coalitions are just an advisory group that gives us some ways from the community about how we can do that.
And I think that actually, what that just brought to my mind is, this is a perfect example. So a lot of what's happening curriculum-wise is becoming technology-based, right? And we're
Some.
Well, all the new curriculum has technology
Right,
as a
well, we have
component, for sure.
levered, we have one-on-one devices at certain grades, and yet, in Ojai, you have a huge group of parents who are worried about screen time.
Yeah.
And so, we have to let, so they say, let's just say you have a parent who has, I don't want my child, my elementary school, on a computer until 4th grade. Well, if there's curriculum time in 2nd grade, how do you resolve that? So how, helping a parent see the importance of learning to use a mouse or learning and the importance and acknowledging the parent's concern about screen time, right? When my kids were in elementary, there was very few computers. So Friday free time was computers. Now, if kids are on computers a lot, maybe Friday free time is no computers.
Right.
So that's community value reflected, but the parents and staff, teachers need to work together on what works versus you know, kind of it getting lost in the all these places. So I think that's, I mean, I don't know that I'm asking you to put something up there, but to me, when I see community values, that's what I recognize is working together on concerns about pesticides, or, you know, we are listening.
Along those lines, could we accommodate somebody who didn't want their kid to have screen time?
Sure. And technology is a tool. It doesn't replace teaching. It's a way of increasing the efficiency of delivery time. But yeah, if somebody had a kid who literally didn't want to never wanted their child, it'd be harder after, say, 4th grade. But you know, we have no plans of one-to-one devices any lower than 4th grade. We, you know, it's. But if you didn't, and I'll just say, there's some work that we need to do around multiple ways of engaging students, and we haven't even had that conversation yet with our teachers. So the PLCs are really the what you're teaching and the why, but the how part, the how you engage students, whether it's with technology, whether it's through direct instruction, the how of teaching is really through something else, which is probably universal design for learning, maybe some project-based learning. There's some other strategies for that how, and we have not even started that conversation yet, but we're going to, so.
Yeah, I'm not super up on the latest pedagogical kind of ideas, but it feels to me like there's definitely a shift among some back away from technology and more towards deeper, slower.
So there's some tools that technology provides us that we can't do otherwise, and some of that is constant analysis of student learning and differentiation of instruction. And so as a classroom teacher without technology, you don't have the ability to see if kids have learned something immediately and then to shift your teaching for the next day. Like Levered allows us to do that, right? Kids do something on the computer, and they have whole group instruction too. Without the computers, they close the computers, they have whole group instruction, they do practice. We see how the practice goes, the teacher gets an analysis, and it says, tomorrow when you teach, you should teach this because these kids are having this. We did error analysis on what they did, and the error analysis says you should do this tomorrow. You couldn't do that without technology, right? So it's not really to replace the teaching, because teaching's still occurring, but it's allowing us to have essentially constant monitoring of learning. And then we can answer those 4 PLC questions about what do we do when a kid doesn't get it? What do we do when a kid does get it and needs extension? The teacher has guidance on figuring that out at that exact moment, and they know what to do tomorrow. Does that kind of make sense? So there's a balance in this whole spectrum of.
Well, I think that, I mean, I have to say, I'm gonna be shocked if that methodology does not have an immediate impact on better test scores. I mean, it's just because it's so directly at the
Where the issues
A, B, C, D, or, you know, which do you choose, which did you learn it?
Yep.
But that's where you teach a parent. I bet the parents didn't know that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
I think I have to have a lot of, are you mean about the technology and what we're actually using it for?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Or how
absolutely.
it
I mean,
helps.
I think parents' sense of screen time, I don't think they have a good understanding of what we're actually doing. Like, for example, we have science curriculum where you go into the online portals and you're doing experimentation with a science experiment where you're saying, okay, I have a claim. If I think, I have a plant here and I think more soil and less water, or more sunlight and less soil is going to make this plant grow more, and then you manipulate those things and then you watch what happens. It's stuff that you wouldn't have the time to do in real life, or maybe even the resources to do in real life, but you're actually really doing scientific activities. It's not like you're playing video games, right? And I think there's a bit of disconnect as to what we mean when we say kids are online and working in computer programs.
And I would say our elementary
rich
kids
instruction.
are mad that we've blocked the math games.
They are. I hear about that a lot, actually.
Like we have more devices, but we
What
have
nerds.
less access to non meaningful work,
Right.
and we block it. And they're like, but we love the math games, but that's not what your device is for.
And I personally have been, had kids come to me and say,
Can you open up securely?
well, can you do it over the summer? Can we have
Right.
math games over the summer, please, if we're taking these devices home?
Right. probably. Putting it on my list. We haven't had devices home over the
Crazy,
summer
right?
yet.
You didn't know kids were coming and saying, "Can I have my math games
Yeah,
back?"
How about weekends?
yeah.
Check out the Washington Post today, there's online an article written by a scientist about screen time and how that negatively impacts your ability to cognitively read information. So it's a major debate out there.
And I think what we're saying is what we're working towards is an aspirational goal of screen time being a meaningful learning activities, not Friday fun day on the computer, right? And that's the shift that we're doing. So it's not like I'm just at home scrolling on Instagram, right? So, all right. So we have improving student achievement, equity, innovation, reflecting community values. We may want to change the words of that, but that's.
One of the things that I kept hearing at the CSBA conference was picking 3 to 6 goals, but 3 or 4 being better because you want to be able to really focus on them. So I'm wondering how many goals we really want.
Yeah, that was my concern as well, but and a lot of this, I look at this, student achievement and college and career readiness. So if we go back up to student achievement, do we, we talk about our
What I think
CTE.
what we would do is bring to you at a future meeting those individual items and say, here's what we think we're doing, what gaps do you see? So now that you've set this, we'll do our work of plugging in what we're doing so that you can see it in like a linear fashion and then come back and say, what else we'd like to see is blah, blah, blah.
I think it's always good for our actions to reflect our goals. And we're spending a huge amount of time and resource into improving our facilities. So to not have a goal for that doesn't make sense to me, unless we're gonna stop doing it.
That's a good point.
Yeah, no, I mean, because I have this property and a bunch of other things that need resolving, it all falls under facilities, you're right. I was gonna suggest fiscal, but I go back to, again, keeping it focused, right? I mean, every year we need to manage our fiscal.
Right.
And really the fiscal follows other strategies, so, and not so, I agree that it's really not just what are we doing, but of what are we doing, what are we looking at specifically? So
What will make a difference?
Yeah. So fiscal's important, but it's not driving the district right now. To me, again, what this parent was talking about earlier is sort of key. The questions of, my kid's performance, social emotional environment, do I want to bring my kids in? Because that's our crisis, right, of really getting the kids back in. And what we're talking about here, I think, is reflecting that.
So under student achievement, it's GATE, it's CTE, it's reading by 3rd grade.
Right.
But again, you don't wanna add too many, that's what my concern too.
Well, but those aren't really goals, those are tasks, or, on the other sheet, what they call,
The big rocks.
on the red sheet, well, the big rocks are what we decide, but they're
Summary.
initiatives.
Their initiatives.
I kind of like the summary of initiatives a
I do
little
too.
bit better than the, one, because just graphically, that means all of those goals on the Valverde one have to be equal, right? And they may
Right.
not all be equal. And on the summary of initiatives, you can just kind of see the true scope of things. And I'm sure graphically we can find something
Yeah.
that's kind of
This is fine,
in
doesn't need to
between
be
the two,
graphically
but-
this works.
No, the only thing that I really like, Valverde, fine, it looks pretty, but the critical thing to me that elevated it above everybody else is there was something measurable.
Well, and
So
I
maybe
think
what
this
we
is
could do
just
is
too
some
much.
version of this with this on the back.
Yeah.
Right, so you have on the front, and maybe what we would do is do these tasks and have them measurable on the front, and then have essentially like this little tasks on the back. Okay, so do you feel like, I think we have 5, improving student achievement, innovation, equity, reflecting community values and facilities. what's missing from this that's in our vision is this kind of social emotional piece and this piece around really the whole child.
Do you
Does that?
think that's not in innovation or in equity?
I don't.
I was thinking it was in student achievement.
Well, so I was wondering if in student achievement, if we want that to be specific, like we're thinking academics, or if we want that to be more like more broad.
I would go for the broad, because again, this conversation here, and what you were saying earlier, this parent was focusing only on scores. And I think part of our message is the scores are only part of what we offer our students. We have a small, intimate academic environment with a much higher level of personal involvement than a lot of places. So that environmental thing contributes to the academic achievement. And this, I mean, we need a place to talk about that, that scores are not everything.
And I also think that social emotional learning and wellness improves student achievement.
So do we want to play? I said improving students, but broadly, like students' lives, students as a catch-all for this exact moment when I can't think of the right words. But do we want then student achievement, and then do we want kind of our whole child things down here? So under improving student lives, I don't know, creating.
Yeah, I would change that entirely, improving, because as a parent, I think I give you a pretty good product.
It's probably not improving, right? It's maybe it's overall student
I think there's a disconnect, and I think it was really brought out earlier in the public comment that, I think there are parents who send their kids to private school because they want their kids to go to Harvard. And that can happen here. But we don't talk about it because we're talking about bringing up everybody. And so we can talk about bringing up everybody till we're blue in the face, and that kid who wants their kid to go to Harvard is never gonna bring their kid here because they want them, you know what I'm saying? And so and I don't know what the answer is. I'm just saying, maybe we need to have more than one message. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I have to say, cause I mean, Kevin, your child's at Berkeley, that's like the big achievement, and he went all through the school, the elementary, junior high, and high school here.
And he wasn't the only one that year, right?
Yeah. So, obviously, and I think those of us who have been in the classroom, and I'm sure teachers, a lot of it has to do with parent involvement. If you have involved parents, wherever your child is, they're probably gonna be successful, and it's one of the programs that Cheryl and I had talked about was teaching parents who don't know how to help at home, like a program that's focused on parents, and how do you, I don't know how to read maybe, so how do you help your child? Well, there's, with First 5, it's like, open a book that has pictures and just talk about the pictures. To a young child, that's reading, they don't know the story, make up your own story, just talking to the child and helping them, right? So part of our equity or innovation is, helping parents.
Along those lines, I mean, I've often, Jana and I have talked about this before, and it's something as a board member, I think if you were to look at a public school and say, what is the biggest the biggest difference in a kid's life that a public school can make is obviously the delta between what their life would have been like if you'd run your school a certain way and how it is because you run a school in a different way. And I totally appreciate what you're saying, Thane, about the communication, but I still see our main mission, precisely because of what Jane said, that some kids are gonna be fine. I don't just write that off and say, oh, you're gonna be fine, but that's the truth, they're gonna be fine. And there are other kids that we could have a huge impact on their lives. As, you know, so I do particularly think that, and I've seen and heard on NPR different stories of educators who have gotten more involved in almost in the family life. And we've talked about it before, and I'm just being reminded of it, that we've talked about initiatives where we get more involved. Parenting, letting parents know, I mean, you know, we always talk about little technological things. I mean, you know, the incredible power of the internet, the incredible power to help your kid answer a question by being able to do rudimentary things on Google. You know, these things are, some people take for granted, but they really are part of when you're, you know, raising a child as in second grade and you don't really have access to that stuff, it could be a huge difference. So anyway, I'm particularly interested in things that we might do that are more engaging in the families.
Well, I think though, what you're talking about does actually help, because I know that.
I'm not disagreeing.
No,
I'm just
saying that some parents.
maybe we're missing out on telling both stories.
I think the improvement in the high school to four-year university rates at Nordoff has helped bring students to Nordoff. Because I know there was a time when it was like 13%. And parents were like, well, I want my kids in 7th grade. I don't really know anything about the high schools. But I know that 90-something% of the students at Villanova are going to college. So I'm gonna send my kid there. Because only 13%, and now Nordoff as we improve, as we lift those people up, people who are looking for that greater challenge are recognizing that it's happening at our schools.
And Thane, I would just say, one of the things we've been doing, I don't know if you've seen it, is our alumni, focus on alumni, and really bringing back, like, we have engineers, we have, you know, young people who are clerks for whatever, like, we've been trying to show the story of those kids who have gone on to those lofty places and are successful. So we are focusing or working on including that story in our messaging. But it's hard to get the message out to everyone. There's no one platform that reaches everyone in the valley.
Right.
So, and we do what we can about submitting through our own Parent Square, through our own Facebook, and then, you know, there are other methods that sometimes work and sometimes don't.
I think the engaged gatherings are a superlative platform for not just hearing from the community, but from we're giving out a lot of this information as well, almost like the quarterly report thing. It is a I think a really powerful mechanism that we've only begun to tap.
I've been planning,
Meaning you.
I've been talking to Shelley a little bit. Other districts do a State of the Schools address, and they have an annual kind of engagement event where they say, like, here's where we are, and it's a community is invited to come in and have that. So I probably try and do that at the end of the school year sometime, or figure out the best timing for that. But to have an annual State of the Schools address where, you know, maybe it's where we release the findings of the guiding coalitions. And they have a role in this State of the Schools. So some kind of forum like that in the future.
I like that. Maybe sell artwork and stuff too.
All right, you're in charge of that part.
If you're looking to buy artwork, it's this Friday night at the Women's Center, Nordoff Art Gala.
That's right.
Plug for that.
All right, so do these seem like, so if we say something like overall student success, but I think of some better words. I want to look at what some other schools have, because they have those goals. Somebody's figured out the wording. And then under that, we have like student achievement and then more of our kind of whole child. And in our whole child, we're also addressing the family. So that gets our two parts of the vision. And then innovation, equity, reflecting community values and facilities.
Facilities can go away under innovation.
Well, so I was trying to capture what Michael was saying, but in our, when we're building facilities, if we can be innovative, if we can, I mean, there will be lots of crossover, right? So in our guiding coalitions, they have a lot to say about the way that we design and build our facilities, especially the environmental group, right? They want bioswales and they want rainwater catchment and they want non-toxic paint and, you know, I have a list, I don't remember off the top of my head, right, but that part of that is innovation, and for us thinking like, okay, can we, what if, when we're designing things, can we design for both innovation and green, and, so it may,
Overlap.
it may go over other places, I'm not entirely sure. I put in here designing for joy, because that is my new, I don't know if you've seen that TED Talk, Designing for Joy. I mean, the leadership team got to watch it, we watched it all together, but it's essentially about how there are certain elements and components when you're designing that bring joy, and that joy is impactful in our overall well-being. And so as we're designing our spaces, from our classrooms to our facilities, as we're redoing them, that we're using those elements of designing for joy, because schools should be joyful, right? Like, they're, of all the places, it's not like a city hall, it's for children. So as we're doing things in our facilities, we're really thinking about how can we add color, how can we add round elements, how can we add, like the preschool is a good example of that, where we have like the color and the round logo. And so that's just my little plug for, that's kind of my guiding principle for facility design.
Well, and this, look at this,
Right,
and look up,
yes,
that's joyful.
yes, that's
It
the,
really is.
Michael, you're on the wrong side of the
I
table.
know.
yeah. Okay, so if you feel like these are good, then what next steps would be to do some work on this? I may not have it by the February board meeting, because we have lots of other things on the February board meeting, which is like in a week. And so,
The only thing I would actually like to circle back to, I'm sorry, because it sounded like you were winding down, was, is there anything here that, part of this setting goals was for our evaluation of you in 6 months? We wanted to be able to say, have we set goals that we can sort of say, we said so-and-so, guiding coalition, if it didn't exist,
Right.
would be a goal, and has she created she created the guiding coalition, so that's helpful in our evaluation.
So would that come with the tasks and measurements?
yeah, so what I'd like to do is bring back the tasks and measurements for you for consideration, and then once you set those measurements, and those measurements would inform your evaluation of me.
Okay.
But I need a little time to think about that, and I'd like to find, I if you don't mind, we could do the research together, or I can do it and bring it back to you.
No, I just wanna make sure
Yeah.
we're being helpful to you, not just to.
Mhm.
Our first goal will be to do the goals.
First, we're gonna try.
That's-
Okay.
Were there other ideas or thoughts that we need to bring up?
I had one more piece, if we're
Oh.
okay with the goals at the moment. I
It
just
sounds
wanted
like it.
to pass this out to you. I got this at the superintendent's conference I was just at. And for some reason cannot count on that side. No, you can have that
No, it's
one.
'cause Cheryl
We can
passed it
share.
on to Cheryl.
I have it. Yeah.
Okay.
But I just thought this was a helpful guiding document for you. I don't know if you've seen one of these before.
That's not all in one place.
No, never seen.
Yeah, so I thought, just so as you are thinking about what's coming up, and what we should be doing, and, like, oh, when do we revise the LCAP goals? Or what's happening? And I just thought it was a helpful tool and document.
Well, according to this, we got nothing going on in February, so let's just go.
I don't know, are you looking at both sides?
I know.
We're right there. Effective governance, annual study session to review governance team norms.
Actually, I didn't plan it that way, but we are.
Governance handbook calendar.
Yeah, I was looking at the other side.
Sorry,
The
I
finance
hate
side.
to,
Finance is kind of blank in February.
we're ahead of schedule. Oh, no, it is February 1st. I was thinking we're still in January.
No, just to share, if you think that that's helpful, we can put it on our website so the public can kind of see what we should be
I
doing.
think it's good.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Staff too may periodically want to have a look at it, just because it has some of those big
Yeah.
events in it.
It does need to be updated because we don't give the CELT anymore. We give, the
LCAP.
the LPAC. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, so, and that timeline has changed, but, I think CSBA made this, so maybe they have a new updated version, or maybe, but that's the only little thing I saw. Yeah, LPAC's been out since 2017, it's been like 4 years. Okay,
Thank you for that.
you're welcome. It's helpful to go to superintendent conferences, because I get all this stuff that I can share with you.
I agree. And I'm so glad, you know, all this new information coming back. That energy is there. So that adjourns the meeting for today. Thank you all for your Saturday morning. I so appreciate it.